For almost 80 years, the United States and Europe were the world's power couple. Same values, same roots, same civilization. They built NATO together. They rebuilt after World War II together. They lectured the rest of the planet together. They weren't perfect, but they were aligned. But lately, the vibes are off. At the Munich Security Conference, which is basically a luxury wellness retreat for diplomats with anxiety disorders, Marco Rubio showed up and said something Europe really didn't want to hear. We used to share values, we used to share roots, but now we don't. This wasn't an insult, he just described reality. To understand what Marco Rubio was actually saying, we need to rewind. There was a time, not that long ago, when the West was at its civilizational peak. Europe built cathedrals that took centuries to finish, universities that shaped science, navies that crossed oceans, empires that didn't ask permission. The West didn't hesitate. It didn't second-guess itself. It asked, can this be built? Can this be conquered? Can this be understood? And because of that mindset, it gave the world modern science, constitutional government, industrial power, global trade, the rule of law. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't perfect, but it was confident. And confidence built civilization. Now, fast forward. Europe likes to say it progressed. What it actually did was abandon its own civilizational backbone. Christian moral framework? Too judgmental. Borders? Too aggressive. National identity? Too dangerous. This is when things changed. This is when the West began doing something it had never done before. It started apologizing for existing. Europe decided something extraordinary. A civilization can survive without believing in itself. So it opened the doors, not just to migrants, but to mass migration without assimilation. No insistence on shared norms. No demand for loyalty to the host society. No confidence left to enforce its own rules. And then came the silence. Churches began to burn quietly. In France, in Germany, in Britain, often without headlines, often without explanations. Not because no one knew, but because saying too much might cause tension. Problems appeared but couldn't be named. When women were assaulted in Cologne on New Year's Eve, police first said everything was fine. The truth came later, after the trust was already gone. Tensions rose, but couldn't be discussed. In Sweden, journalists later admitted they stayed quiet for years about gang violence and who was involved. Not because it wasn't happening, but because talking about it felt forbidden. Citizens complained and were told the problem wasn't crime or arson or lawlessness. The problem was their perception. This wasn't tolerance, it was institutional fear. And this is where Rubio's reminder matters. America didn't fall from the sky. 2.5 centuries ago, the people who built the United States arrived carrying something very specific. European memory, Christian moral frameworks, Western ideas about work, order, law, and responsibility. Not perfection, but structure. Rubio's point wasn't nostalgia. It was a warning. Without a shared cultural foundation, the United States and Europe aren't allies. They're just two landmasses with matching flags and completely different priorities. And while America is, painfully, trying to pull itself back toward coherence, Europe is redecorating the house while the foundation cracks. Here's where the marriage really started to rot. Europe didn't just drift away from its civilizational roots. It turned around and started lecturing America for not drifting with it. America enforced borders. Europe called it fascism. America questioned mass migration. Europe called it racism. America asked who pays. Europe called it selfish. Every attempt by the United States to correct course was framed as moral failure. But here's the part Europe never explained. While criticizing America, Europe still expected America to pay the bills. They wanted U.S. troops guarding their borders, U.S. intelligence watching their skies, U.S. weapons deterring their enemies, U.S. taxpayers funding their security. In other words, Europe wanted independence in rhetoric and dependence in reality. They wanted to insult the husband and keep the credit card. This wasn't partnership, it was freeloading with attitude. For decades, this worked. Every time Europe complained, America apologized. Every time Europe resisted, America compromised. Every time Europe refused responsibility, America picked up the tab. So Europe learned a dangerous habit. Criticize America loudly, rely on America quietly. And then came Donald Trump. America stopped apologizing. Trump didn't argue with Europe's values. He questioned Europe's usefulness. He didn't ask, "Do you agree with us?" He asked, "What do you contribute?" And for the first time in generations, Europe didn't have a good answer. Because when the lectures stopped, and the speeches ended, and the values panels closed, Europe had no leverage left, no unified military, no serious deterrence, no willingness to take risk, just opinions. And opinions don't stop wars. This is the moment the alliance broke. Not because America abandoned Europe, but because America realized it had been carrying someone who no longer wanted to walk. Then came the Gaza Board of Peace. Trump invited the world, and the responses were revealing. Roughly 24 countries showed up. Arab states came with money. Islamic countries came with manpower. Regional powers came ready to enforce. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Egypt, Jordan, Indonesia, Morocco, Kazakhstan, Albania, Argentina. Cash, troops, commitments. And Europe? Absent. France, Germany, the United Kingdom, Italy, Spain, Ireland, Norway, Sweden, Poland, Greece. Not because they were excluded, because they had nothing to offer. No money, no troops, no appetite for Gaza. Europe wanted influence without cost. Trump's answer was simple: then stay out. And he meant it. Europe wasn't angry about Gaza. Europe was angry because for the first time in decades, no one needed them. Then came Ukraine. February 17th to 18th, 2026. Geneva. For 2 years, Europe talked non-stop about Ukraine. Moral speeches, blue and yellow flags, endless press conferences. They spoke like generals. They acted like commentators. But when real peace talks began, the room was small. United States, Russia, Ukraine. That's it. Europe didn't get a seat. Europe didn't get a microphone. Europe didn't even get a chair. They waited outside, not because America forgot them, because America didn't need them. Europe brought no decisive military leverage, no unified strategy, no willingness to escalate or de-escalate. What Europe did bring was ambition, reconstruction contracts, political credit, control over post-war Ukraine. They wanted to cash in without having cashed out. America saw it, Russia saw it, Ukraine understood it. So Europe stayed in the hallway, refreshing phones, hoping for leaks, pretending this was still coordination. It wasn't. This wasn't exclusion, this was downgrading. In the old world, Europe mattered because America carried it. In the new world, America negotiates with people who can actually end wars. And Europe? Europe learned a hard lesson. If all you bring to a war is speeches and symbols, you don't shape the peace. At this point, The pattern was obvious. Trump wasn't abandoning allies, he was sorting them. On one side, countries that show up, pay up, deploy, enforce. On the other, countries that issue statements, hold conferences, wave flags, then send invoices. The first group gets influence. The second group gets ignored. This is the new rule. Saudi Arabia pays. It gets a say. UAE commits. It gets access. Indonesia sends forces. It's in the room. Europe? Europe writes op-eds. Europe believes history entitles it to relevance. Trump believes relevance must be earned, and that's the real rupture. Europe still thinks alliances are emotional. Trump treats them as contractual. No contribution? No leverage. No leverage? No seat. Europe calls this brutal. Trump calls it honest. For decades, Europe survived under American protection while slowly hollowing itself out. Low defense spending, shrinking armies, risk avoidance as policy. They outsourced hard decisions and kept the moral commentary. But the world changed. Wars don't end because of values panels. They end because someone pays the price. And when that reality returned, Europe had nothing left to offer except advice. And then, Canada joined the performance with Europe. Ottawa flirted with ditching the F-35, talked about Swedish alternatives, talked about defense independence, which is optimistic, because continental defense isn't a lifestyle choice, it's infrastructure. Canada doesn't defend North America alone. It never did. Its skies are wired into NORAD, American radars, American satellites, American command systems. The F-35 isn't just a jet, it's a key card. Canada threatening to switch jets is like changing the steering wheel while the US controls the engine, the radar, and the fuel. You can talk about Swedish Gripens all you want, but unless Sweden is joining NORAD, rewriting North American air defense, and paying for the software backbone, you're still flying under American protection. Canada's outburst wasn't about jets. It was about wounded pride. A country realizing that sovereignty sounds great in speeches, but defense still runs on capability, and feelings don't intercept missiles. While Trump was busy sorting his allies, the celebration began. A court ruled Trump's tariffs were not lawful. Europe cheered. Canada smiled. Editorial boards popped champagne. They thought, finally, process had spoken. Finally, Trump had been checked. Finally, karma had arrived, which is ironic, because while they were celebrating paperwork, Trump was still setting the agenda. The Board of Peace didn't disappear. Europe didn't get invited back. Ukraine talks didn't reopen their seats. No army returned. No leverage reappeared. No relevance was restored. Europe mistook delay for defeat. Canada mistook procedure for protection. They won a headline. They still lost the room. Because courts can slow tariffs. They can't make useless allies useful again. This was never about tariffs, or jets, or Gaza, or Ukraine. It was about reality catching up. For decades, the West pretended unity was automatic. That shared history guaranteed shared purpose. That sentiment could replace strength. That illusion is gone. America didn't leave Europe. Europe walked away first, from borders, from culture, from responsibility, then demanded the benefits anyway. Trump didn't start the divorce, he finalized it. No more sentimental alliances, no more moral freeloading, no more protection without contribution. In the new world, allies are measured by capability. Not nostalgia, not editorials, not applause from conference halls. The Great Western Divorce is already complete. There will be no reconciliation dinner, no counseling session, No shared values panel, only a choice. Adapt or fade quietly into commentary. America has moved on, and this time, it didn't look back.
That was just the appetizer. Watch the full roast, only on Pastcast. Link in the description. Subscribe before the next war starts.